Hi everybody, tells me we're live. We're ready to do some more notch audio reactive stuff. Just a forewarning here, I have a very curious cat today with me. She wasn't as curious yesterday, so yeah, she might interrupt the stream. We'll see what happens. Everyone good? Can everyone hear me out in cyberspace? Well, I guess let's see. Let's hope that people are watching us. So, last time around, for those of you that didn't watch, we talked about getting sound into Notch. So I'm not going to cover that here. If you have any questions, refer to the previous video. Same setup, nothing's changed. We still have our X32 doing some Dante magic coming into Notch. Just got to confirm in our project that we are looking for our Matty face, which we are, and let's preemptively tell it to listen to that and capture that in the block, just to be good little people. YouTube's telling me my streaming quality's weird. So, gotta be good little boys and save. Just to start. I normally do like to have a little base project that I use. I'm not doing that for this because I like walking through it with you guys, just to kind of show my thought process. But normally I have just some base layers and stuff, which I'll actually, my next video plan is to be talking about getting Notch into Disguise. So I'm going to kind of go over how I normally approach that in my next stream probably. So anyway, starting out here. Last time around, we started using the sound modifier, which we're using to wiggle some parameters in iMag. We can also use that sound modifier, this is actually going to show you one of my favorite patches. You can use that sound modifier to modify, well, anything in Notch. So this patch, I'm going to base this off of, I actually, I use this one, this is kind of my, I use it when I'm doing some, like, I'm going to call it VJ. I'm really not a VJ, but I generally use it a lot when I'm doing, like, I like to call it the cocktail hour. It's a good just kind of overlay. I put in, like, a screen or multiply over just a background loop, and it's super effective just kind of to add a little bit of dynamicness to cocktail hour, as I normally call it. So what we're going to do is we're going to make a light, an area light, to be specific. We're going to make a camera. I'm going to pull that back, I'm going to look at that light, and we don't see anything because we don't see anything. Because in order to see something, I think we need to turn on volumetric lighting. So we're going to add volumetric lighting to that. Volumetric lighting now, it didn't prompt me this time, weird. Normally it prompts you to turn on deferred rendering. To do that, you click the root node and you click this little deferred rendering box, and it goes unread now. Let's see. Look at that. So, okay, so now we got some light. Gonna move that over here, and we're gonna untick the visible surface. And we're actually gonna go ahead and we're just gonna duplicate this. How many times? Let's go 7. And just kind of, I'm just eyeballing it for right now. You could go and be a lot more precise and fan these out to be proper. For those of you that don't know, Control-R will default whatever you have to the root node as a connection, so you can just click copy, paste, root node, as you can see by the little keyboard in the corner of my screen there. Actually, just we're going to be doubly lazy. Move all these here. I like to, in my node graph over here, I like to kind of align, especially when I'm dealing with multiples. Like I like to align so you can see kind of a visual representation on your node graph of what's what. So we have 7 lights here. Let's make some color. Let's make these ones red. As I said in the other stream, and I don't think I actually said it, I like to make I like to keep everything red or cyan, because then, and there's a cat, and might be bombing us here in a second, because then in like a VJ environment, you can rotate the hue wheel kind of quickly and still get a match color. And if you're bouncing from layer to layer, clip to clip, you're always still kind of in the same ballpark scheme. So I'm going to go red cyan, and the reason I go red is because it's 0 degrees on the hue wheel for most applications. Not sure if it is. Oh, wait, Disguise doesn't do a hue wheel. Sorry, there's a little fluffy one crawling over my desk if you can't see the camera shaking. So we have 7 lights here, and let's make them do something. So we're going to start off, we're going to do our chain, we're going to do a sound modifier, and as I said in the last one, well, we already have the sound modifier in there. I like to use the range remapper, just kind of by default after my sound modifier to get the floating into a more sane value. And I realized before I copied this, I kind of hosed myself preemptively. What we're going to do is we're going to make all these all these lights controllable via sound. So we're actually going to have to expand all these. I should have done this on the first one, so I didn't have to do it 7 times. But alas, we're going to drag that range remapper up into the brightness. And we're going to, I should have done this once, so well, live and learn. Or not that. And this is one of those patches where, like, I love this patch because it's so simple, but it has definitely helped me milk 30 seconds of content into an hour of usable set before. I also find it's great to throw something like this, potentially desaturate even just over, client supplied looks or something like that. Again, just once you see what this does, it will all make sense. Just gives it a nice little bit of pulse to the music. So got all those wired up to the brightness, and now we're going to make sure we have these all plumbed to the sound modifier. So right now we got nothing. And right now all those lights are defaulted to 1, so we're going to go ahead to our range remap, and we're going to go replace all those, and we're going to go, I think lights default to 2 or 3. Let's just go to 3 just to see what happens. And before I even start playing music, I'm not sure how YouTube's got like our copyright, but what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go bass on the left, on the far right I'm going to go treble, in the middle I'm going to go mids, and what these do, I don't know why the EQ doesn't show up on the ASIO devices. It was showing up for me earlier. What this does is it will show you, or kind of auto default some of these EQ. It kind of does like a little mini mix. I don't know why it doesn't show up. I don't know if any of the Notch people are watching, if they could answer that for me or not, but this is just going to be kind of a poor man's spectrum analyzer initially. Did I? What did I do there? Oh, you're right, I did do. I screwed that up. Thank you, Josh. That was unintentional. Very unintentional, so thank you for pointing that out. So right now we're playing and we have nothing. I'm going to go ahead here. I have my things to make Notch EDM with. This is actually, we're going to go to one of my friends' mixes here because I like this song. So, basic look. You can hear some Spotify. See how quick I get a copyright strike on this. And this is way too flickery for me. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go in and put the decay way down and the attack way down. So I think my range remap's too high because these are super bright, even though I'm barely feeding them anything, as you can see by the current value. So we're going to go ahead and take that down to 1. That's kind of nice. So basic kind of pulsing to the music. Go in here potentially and maybe get the bass attack back up a little bit and see what we... And as I said, this isn't necessarily the finished product, however, I like doing it over just... Like, I kind of just like having it, basic overlay. I mean, throwing this over any form of... I have my driver here. No, I don't, crap. Over just any form of VJ content, bring it into a layer in Resolute, throw it on top. Kind of very dynamic. The center one, I don't like the center one being bright white. We're just going to turn that scattering intensity down a little bit and kind of see. So, totally basic look. Totally, yeah, it's actually not that heavy on the CPU. I have made several versions of this as well. My kind of default audio reactive VJ patch I have, I'll make it, make it a little funky maybe, throw some, VHS scan lines over it. Something. Yeah, not feeling that what I actually wanted to do. I think this is one of my current favorites. Turn the CRT emulation. So the Pixelate, I like the CRT emulation. It kind of does like a half-tone screen, but not really. Just a little bit of texture to it. And there's a lot you can do with this, as I said. It's just super basic. You can expand it with lights. You can change the colors of the lights. You can make the attack, like so. I can bring the attack or the decay way back on the center one, make it a little more dynamic. But kind of basic, low-key, first hour of the night, a little bit of dynamicism to your set. So that's basically the same kind of world we were using on our iMag effects, where we were taking in either a specific sound or a band of music. And Josh, since I know you're watching, I do have my Firehouse hoodie on just for you, but it's getting warm out here, so I'm getting serious. So it's a good, basic, good, simple one. One of my favorites, actually. But that's basically the same idea we used earlier, except just as a modifying lights instead of modifying an iMag handle. So we're gonna step it up a little bit. Gonna play around with one of my other favorites, which is the FFT Texture. So if you type FFT into your search, you actually see a couple things, and hopefully we're going to get to all three of the cool ones today. FFT Effector, FFT Deformer, and FFT Texture. One's a cloner, one effector, one's a deformer, and one is a generator. The generator is abused for me. I love it. Same deal as before. You bring in a capture sound, and you pipe it in. Oh, the one thing of note too for this, which we didn't do on the previous one, on the sound modifiers, because I'm listening to Spotify, but think of this as, a DJ set. Because I'm listening to a stereo input, I actually am specifying stereo verse on the iMag ones. I was speccing left or right to give you channel 1 or channel 2 of the feed. I'm just currently feeding stereo program down both. Actually, I'm only feeding it down. And now I'm feeding it down both. So yeah, just worth noting. And normally for these patches I'll default to stereo just because it's normally in a more pre-recorded music environment. So the FFT texture is super awesome. FFT stands for Fast Fourier Transform. It's basically a mathematical equation for analyzing audio, among other things. I think it also does RF and some other spectrum stuff. But I think it's a logarithmic equation, so there's less information at the bottom and more information at the top. But in our environment, what it does is, if I preview our texture, is it does a waterfall of the frequencies. Continue using taking over. Good song. But if we go into scale here, we want to turn this up, and they changed this up a bunch since I last used it, so I'm excited. But as you can see, you kind of have the high frequencies up top, and when the bass drum comes back in, you'll see it at the bottom. So this is just a standard 2D video texture. It does have alpha now. It used to not, I don't think. But you can see you get some pulsing going on the bottom. I've used this to feed displacement maps in iMag as well, and used it to generate stuff in iMag. It's definitely useful. You do have a resolution. I normally default it to like 512 by 512 unless I need something else specific. you have a bunch of handles, same thing as the other. You have your attack and your decay, so that actually plays how much it plays in. Smoothness. This fall off range is new. Has this decay buffer size, which I'll leave it there for now. You also have some min max values. Spikiness does some. Let's play something like that. So that's a good visualization, and we could take that in and manipulate that as a 2D texture with any of the notch post effects, hence the little video null hanging out there. And I've definitely used that to feed some interesting things like particle systems or things like that with image emitters. But I'm gonna start going, I'm gonna go a little more Atari with it. I'm gonna go ahead here and put in a shape 3D. I'm gonna put in a plane. Put in a camera. And we're gonna move that camera. Let's see that camera. Oh, it's a plane. Okay. So we're gonna see that camera. And actually, one of my favorite things to do in Notch with stuff like this is the camera actually has a, you can do a, this node has a target node. Lights also have that. So if you drag camera to target node, it'll automatically center on that. So no matter where you move the camera, it'll point at the thing. So I love doing that. It's one of my favorite, just kind of cheap Notch hacks. I'm gonna go ahead and make this plane, go 10 by 10 by 10. Feels a little big, but move it back in the plane. So, go in these subdivisions. In the Notch default geometry, you can change the subdivisions. I think we're gonna go 50 by 50, and it'll make sense in a second. We're also going to turn lines visible on, and we're going to give them a nice magenta color because I secretly love using Vaporwave. I'm going to make this material black. And we're going to go to our camera. So we have a very nice kind of Tron, vapory inspired grid. There's probably someone screaming right now that this isn't Vaporwave, but I really don't care. And we're going to go a little bit more aggressive on here. What do we want to listen to? I apologize in advance if anyone doesn't like my choice in music. Let's go to My Warehouse. This is one of my go-to Notch-ness songs. So we have this texture coming in, and that's actually with a little more aggressive music. This is a bit much on the spikiness, so we're actually gonna bring that decay buffer way up. And we're going to unpreview this, wherever that is, preview and viewport. And we're going to go back to our deformers, and we are going to do a displacement. I was confused displacement and displacement map. Hold on here in a second. Nope, that's not it. So it's displacement map. And what displacement map does is it lets you feed it an image that it'll use the luminance of the image. I think it can actually change what it uses, but it uses that as displacement. So obviously we're feeding that texture in, and it gives us kind of a very cool mountainous spectrum effect. So right now it's going left to right, which kind of boring, but let's turn our max displacement up. The only thing you do have to play with in this, as you can see, is it peaks very quickly, so you need to kind of make sure your image is, you might have to go into your FFT texture and kind of screw with it to not hit white right away. Let's turn that down a little bit. So within the FFT texture, you do have some, I don't know if these actually work. No, they actually don't. Okay, so what I was trying to do, and part of the reason I piped this into a null here is I don't want it going that way. I want it going, I want it rotated, so I'm actually going to do this. There's a bunch of ways you can do this, but I'm doing it this way because this is how I normally do it. So you can go 90 or... So, kind of very cool, endless mountain vibe. I'm actually going to go in here. Also, it's worth noting, I think you can straight up rotate the displacement deformer, but it's always how I do it, so I did it that way. So, So you see you have the higher stuff on the right-hand side. You know, apply a little bit of a glow, because why not? So, as you can see, stupidly simple patch that gives you a kind of really cool effect. But can also, you know, obviously, as I like to say in the last one, salt to taste. It's worth noting while we actually have this built, gonna undo the displacement deformer, and I'm gonna go and use, so I Control 1, for those of you who don't know, will bypass a node and notch. Oh wait, that's the cloner one, we don't want to do it quite yet. FFT Deformer. I'm going to apply that to the shape and pipe in the same sound. So, the FFT Deformer kind of does the same thing, except it doesn't really give you the rolling texture effect, which you may or may not want. You have a bunch of different mapping modes. You can go radial, and I just spent days playing with this mode, because you can just do some really cool stuff with it. I don't know why it asked for the frequency band, because FFT by default is all the frequencies. I think that might just be a default. You also have some fun fall-off options, so you can control how far out it goes. And any of these options can be piped in with another sound modifier, so you can go super down the rabbit hole with this. Same if your attack or decay, you can. Yet another basic look that, you know, you can continue to milk and do some cool stuff with. Same thing, I have a whole series of these vapor wavy effects. It is worth noting, you do have, depending on how you do it, your amount of displacement is affected by the number of triangles in your texture. So if I count this way, way, way down to, you know, 5 by 5, it gets a little more battle zone-y versus my 50 by 50. Of course, you know, the higher the better, or the higher the smoother, however, the higher the more processing it takes. So your mileage may vary, of course, with all of this. And actually one of my favorites with this same look. I think I already dropped enough film on the screen. Sorry, Mom. I think my mom was watching this. So we're gonna, actually I need to change it. We're gonna remove the glow. Actually, I guess we're gonna, so I copied my layer. If you go into your texture, or your timeline view, you can just copy and paste layers. So I can safely nuke some of this without too. Actually do another shape, control. So putting a sphere in, and actually, like I affectionately call this one the slime ball, and I use this a lot. These are 3. And this one we're actually going to put a light in as well, which right now is in the middle of the shape. So same deal, target node. Let's look at our scene view here, make sure we're pointing it. I don't like that. So, and as I said, with a lot of these, I like to keep them kind of monochrome or black and white, so they can mix nicely with other things, because I'm normally doing this in some form of VJ environment. But we're going to take the same FFT deformer and apply it to the shape 3D, see what happens. But what's cool with this too is you can change the displacement direction, so you can do a spherical, you can do planar, or UV, it'll respect UV texture. But my kind of go-to, one of my favorite looks, just because I think it looks really cool, is you feed in the video texture into the, or the FFT texture into the displacement map, and you get this kind of very, as you can see, my polygons are kind of low, so I'm actually going to go in here and up this to like, and that might be a bit aggressive. But you get this very kind of I call it the slime ball. So, very dynamic, very pretty, and people who are smarter than me can light this to be better. But then you can also, on top of something like this, you can go in and do something like digital chroma glitch, but then you take that into a sound modifier. And just even something basic like sound modifier into an active parameter on here. So, and what I'll normally do is play with the attack and decay on this so it only with a little bit of playing, you can guess so it only goes on, beat or on big. And even in that, maybe apply to only the treble or only the bass. One of my favorite things to do too in Notch with the audio reactive is to attach everything to a sound modifier. So when the sound goes to nothing, you have a literal black screen. That's kind of just a fun little party trick I like to do. But yes, I mean, again, simple. I mean, this is under 10 nodes and doing something cool. To answer Josh's question, like if you want to do like the speaker cone thing, I kind of was actually hinting at it on this other patch, I think. And there's probably a better way to do that. I would almost just do a normal, like if you want a vibrating speaker cone, you might be better off doing like a sound modifier into just a normal displacement node versus trying to go FFT, because FFT is trying to do the whole speaker, or the whole frequency. My mapping mode is radial within the FFT Deformer, just on a plane. But another simple one, so that's kind of covering the FFT displacement or FFT Deformer as well as the FFT Texture, and the FFT Displacement and Deformer are obviously applied to 3D shapes within Notch. The other fun one you can do if you come into a new layer, and this specific look was kind of inspired by something else I saw, and I think it was actually about the Touch Designer forums, but I always like to browse everything and see. So we're going to go cylinder, we're going to make it 10, 5, make that 0.1. So the cylinder we're starting out with is actually, it's important, but it's not what you'll see in a second. We're actually not going to see this on screen at the end of our party, but we're still going to point a camera at it. This keeps going off. Glad you guys like my music. This is so one of my favorite memories of Tor as we are getting into these type of things is I would keep Dan Hadley company as he was programming, and so I would just basically do what I'm doing now. I have one ear in, listening to this here playlist, and just making stuff in Notch while kind of keeping him company as he worked through the night. Back to what we're actually doing. So subdivisions X and Y are important for us. We're going to go 50 and 1. The 1 may seem odd, but it'll make sense in a second. But what we're going to do then is we're going to go... Actually, I'm going to keep that shape. We're going to disconnect it for now. And we're going to make another shape 3D. This one is going to be a pixel. 0.5, 0.5. That could be 3 and 0.5. I always screw this one up because I always forget how I want the radius to look. But I think this will work pretty well. So we have our two shapes, which we care about right now. And then what we're going to do is we're going to come over here and we're going to grab ourselves a cloner, and we're going to go clone to mesh, connect that to our root, and we want to clone to the circle, which is that shape, and we are going to want to clone our little pill, which gives us something that looks like that. Number clone, I think I said we had 50 subdivisions, so we're going to go 50, which is only half night. I think I should have looked at caps. No. There was something I had to do, and I'm trying to remember what it was now that I... Vertex, but it's cloning 2 per thing right now, which is not right. Check my notes here. Write down how I did this one. Alas. Screw it, let's go. Actually, no, 50. Basically, what this subdivisions does is that divides it into. I don't know why it's doing it, but why it's doing it twice. But anyway, Notch is a discovery, as a lot of you guys know, so we're actually going to make that about that size. And we are going to cover down to our cloners, and we are going to use the FFT Effector. And this basically is the same idea as the FFT Deformer, except it responds to cloners. So same thing, pipe our sound in. Pipe our sound in. And what's nice about this, the FFT Effector, is it lets you modify what it actually does. So we're playing, and we just want to do something like modify position, modify your scale, and it applies it over the texture. Or over the cloner, I mean. Same thing as the other ones, you have a bunch of fall off modes, direction, you can play with, you know, your attack, your decay. Actually move our camera here, but camera. A lot of times what I'll like to do is I'll just do something like, or I'll do
Are we good guys or bad guys?
An area light, you know, in, I don't know why it's now defaulting to visible source, I have to get used to. But actually one of my favorites, I actually was playing with this in prepping for this demo, and I really liked how it turned out, so we're just going to roll with it. Shape 3D. We're just going to use a basic cloner for this one, not cloning to mesh. But we're going to make our grid count. Let's go, I think 8, 8, 8. How did I screw that up? 8, 8. 8, 8, 8. And we're going to make our grid like super tight. 5. And we are going to put a light. And we're going to make it an omni light. We're going to turn off our scattering intensity. And we're going to do volumetric lighting. This is a reoccurring trend for those of you that I continue to do this. Which gives us kind of a cool QB glow thing. And then we are going to do a FFT Effector. Camera. Move that back a little bit. Or not that. And I actually was playing, if you make the balls, you can go minus scale. Again, it doesn't kind of advertise that, but get this kind of cool pulsy. So I actually ended up making 2 versions of this patch in my. So we have. Let's redraw on here. What do we want to hear? A lot of variations of cloner walls. So this one right now is only manipulating scale and kind of gives you a cool depth with some light at the end of the tunnel. Literally, I'm gonna go ahead and duplicate this. Maybe. And instead of, I'm gonna go and zero all these out, and we're going to do position movement instead. Get aggressive. And a lot of times I'll go to my wide to see what it's actually doing. So right now it's pointing. Oh wait, I don't like it. So I think that's to rotate. Yeah. There we go. So coming towards our camera, I think we might have to move our camera back, or move our camera in. One of the other things what I was trying to show, and I screwed up what I was actually doing, is if you direction radial, that's what I was missing. Back to our camera. One of my favorite things to do with this notch, and it really tanks my system resources, is instead of doing a regular camera, do a fisheye camera. It's really aggressive. Not feeling this, but you get the idea. One of the other cool things, I'm going to show you some other cool ones that I'm doing. But a lot of variations of the cloner stuff. And I'll be the first to say, and I know Kev is on here, so I feel kind of embarrassed even talking about art because, quite frankly, I think mine sucks. But I'm definitely not the artist of the bunch in this. I feel that there's a lot. Notch is super powerful. I feel that you can do some really cool stuff in the 3D world, which just is way beyond me. But I think I'd like to stick to my niche and kind of just do what I do in it. But I know there's definitely some way cooler art that can be done with this. All these are dirty, and I think my mom might be watching. I'm sorry, Mom. And actually, this one I'm working on, we might be getting a cat, just a heads up to everyone viewing at home. This is one of my new favorite kind of looks I've been playing with. If any of you have ever played with or are aware of it, I think Tech Motivated, you watch YouTube, has a pretty cool video on the Atari video music. It was a box made in the 70s that you plugged into your TV and got like trippy as hell visuals, and this is very much inspired by that, going to be inspired by that. Very flock of seagulls. So what I'm going to do is going to take those way down. I'm going to tell you way more efficient ways to do this. This we're actually going to go back kind of, we're going to go, oh, Jesus. Nope. I wish there was a way to make the freaking thing not show the scroll wheel. I think the cat has discovered the warmness behind the streaming computer. So this is going back to what I was saying, that I'd like to make a sound. I kind of like to make these do nothing when they're idle, and then when the sound hits, big things happen. So I'm just scaling all three of these by default. So these actually got to scale all the way down to 0. Right now I think it's by default doing... So, pulsing on beat, basic look, kind of boring. But let's go transform image, throw that into my root node. Capture this, copy paste that, and one of my other fun things that I like to do, and this probably isn't the best music for it, is do something with a super long decay. That might be longer than that. We'll see what I'm doing here in a second. So it's not necessarily on beat, but the louder the image, and actually, I've actually used the smooth envelope modifier a lot too to kind of do that. I'm going to quantize this data at 0.2, and what the quantize modifier does is it basically will snap to the that value every 0.2. It'll snap. So what we're doing here with the transform image node is where we're going to go wrap mode repeat. So what happens is suddenly when I scale it, it'll duplicate the image. So we're going to go scale X. We're actually going to go upper. We're going to go 1. We're going to actually invert this. So in theory, we're going to. So as it gets bigger, you get some kind of cool stacking. And now this, I debated not showing you guys this because it's actually one of my current favorite tricks, as I like to call. So this is very vintage inspired. As I said, I encourage all of you to go have a seizure looking at the thing, the Atari video music. Kind of boring look. We're gonna go here. We're gonna go vintage. We're gonna add some VHS scan lines. Again, connecting to our root node because I don't care. Because this is normally I try not to connect things to the root node, but on things like this, it's not as huge of a deal because it's one solid look, but we're not necessarily having to manipulate the texture. We're gonna give it some scan lines. We're gonna give it some VHS blur. Or some scan lines. We're going to give it some, I can't type today. Go for the VHS blur. Kind of vintagey vibes. But one of my favorite things I've been playing with lately is the frame feedback node. And what's really cool about that is, I mean, obviously it gives you some feedback. So on some of these I've been able to kind of use it as a, I call it a poor man's motion blur, which I guess really isn't the best way to think about it, but you can kind of get some blur. But what's really nifty about it is you can, it has a output node over here, and so you can apply post effects to what it's doing and only what it's doing. So what we're going to do is we're going to do what I feel kind of looks. I'm calling it CRT glow. I don't know if that's the right term for it, but I kind of dig it. So we're going to take another VHS blur. And as you can see, we're 0.3 frame feedback blend. And we're just going to crank everything. Our blur scale, we're going to be 1. We're going to crank our chroma blur up to 10. Our chromatic intensity, we're going to go up to 1.3, because these are the numbers I figured out earlier. We're going to crank our noise up to 1. And we are going to get rid of the blue because the pink tint's kind of weird. But it kind of gives you a really nice ambient glow to it, I feel. The other cool thing on this patch that I've done is if you duplicate this shape and you do the same scale, we're going to actually unconnect it, and we're going to go to our select child node, connect that over to our root. And what that does is that actually lets us kind of drive between these two. So I can select one, or I can select two, which are actually the same now. But we're going to make the other one, let's make the other one pink, and let's make it a sphere. And we're actually going to expose this. Same deal, sound modifier, range remap. Select child node. I hate when it does that. Kind of the same deal as the transform image, where depending on if it gets loud or not, it might change shapes. Let's see when it drops. Why isn't it doing it? Oh. Why isn't it doing it? Oh, that's why. So, out. That's the downside about copying and pasting crap, is you. And a lot of times, too, with the range remap, I like it, especially for something like select child node, where it doesn't care about the decimal points. You can kind of adjust the threshold by going slightly higher than 1 or slightly higher than 2 or whatever. So you're overloading the input, but it's only can select up to 1, so it doesn't care that input's overloaded. It'll probably break something internally, and there's some notch devs crying as I say that, but same deal, kind of just basic look that you can milk. Frame feedback, I've played with this a little bit more, get a little bit more glow, and the frame feedback will feed back into itself if you let it, so even within that too, you can definitely get a little bit different vibes, making it biased to blue. The other thing with the frame feedback, which I like for trying to get some fake motion blur, is you change it to max versus blend.
Squeeze the trigger. Squeeze the trigger. Squeeze the trigger.
So a couple basic looks, and as I said, you can, enhance them however you want to. This one I threw a little bit more post effects on. Some of these other cloner ones, I mean, obviously by default Notch is very clean. So you can just, throwing everyone's favorite. I feel like I need to go back to the training just so I can listen to them rant about the choice of film blur. But even that too. And again, a lot of these I like to kind of keep as building blocks into a Resolume set or something like that, or D3, or pick your poison, and just have them at the ready to. And yeah, any questions in the chat? Other than where can you get my playlist? Aaron doesn't like my. I'm sad. Aaron doesn't like my playlist or my.
And I'm a hustler.
Any questions? I don't know if I'm gonna go.
So there was this DJ who was like kicking off. I don't know what he was doing, but it was sick, man. Like he was like hands in the air. And then this cat walked in, not like a
Actually,
cat,
one of my
cat,
favorite call this one if you add.
you know what I'm saying, dog, like cats and dogs. It was raining. It wasn't raining.
Even something like this, adding
And I don't know whether he was really saying.
motion data marsh makes it weird, but like
all he kept saying was eat, sleep, rave, repeat.
just inherently adding something like
Eat, sleep, rave, repeat.
totally changes the mood.
Sleep, rave, repeat.
Eat, sleep, rave, repeat. Eat, sleep,
On the FFT, a lot of times, I normally when I'm dealing with more pre-recorded stuff, I just bring it in raw. The FFT texture on more than one occasion, I've definitely cropped it as a texture or manipulated it that way to get specific things out of it. I've also done things like change that pixel down to like 1 so you get an overall amplitude as a image. The other, dirty trick or stuff like that I've used on more than one occasion to get like a 4-man's VU meter with a notch into D3. I've literally had to just move a gradient up and down and then put that to like a pixel map on the next 20 bar or something. Again, that's just basic sound modifier. But overall, I generally try to use the FFT texture as a whole thing, mostly because it's dynamic. You get multiple bands. And there's so many different options, even like something like this, just making it radial versus making it linear, you just get significantly different looks. Actually, I haven't tried this in this yet. We're gonna go ahead and just gonna go ahead and copy this and see what happens when I apply it to my. Yeah, I don't like that. And you can also stack deformers, so I mean that's both the FFT and the displacement on there.
Eat, sleep, rave, repeat.
This is one of my favorite album arts of recent. I don't know if let me show you. No, yeah. What time is it? Booty time. So yeah, I think that's it for today. I think unless anyone else wants me to continue talking about audio, I think my next video is going to be getting this all into the skies and then potentially getting it into Resolume as well. So don't forget to like and subscribe, comment, YouTube, Facebook, check out Notch. Oh, the other shameless plug for this, as we are in the downtime, Notch is giving out a free PLE license, and I saw with Disguise, and I think Ava Lights is partnering with them now with the AI server as well as Disguise is giving out a designer license till September. So go register, like it, download it, play with it, learn. On that note, I'm signing off.